Hello everybody and welcome back to another album review. Today we are going to be taking a look at the newest album from the band Fit for a King titled Dark Skies. So first things first, if you've seen my last couple of videos, you will probably know I'm going to say this already. I apologize for the background noise. It's still warm in my dorm room, and I've still got a billion fans running. Not much I can do about that. It's quite warm in here, and the only way to really cool it off is to open the window or open the door. And the door is closed right now because I'm recording, and then the window is closed because it's been raining today. So that doesn't really help. There's not much I can do about it, so sorry about that. But anyways, today I'm going to be reviewing the new album by Fit for a King, which at the time of this recording, hopefully I get this video out before the end of the week, but it's been out for a few days, about 4 days or so, and I've listened to it a couple times through, and I've also listened to the singles many times actually, and I figured I'd give you guys my thoughts on it. First, we're going to go through the good things on this album, and as I usually point out, the production quality, the sound quality, all of that's pretty good. Pretty much the same thing I say in a lot of my reviews, that where it has good production, which is most of the albums that I review, because nowadays that's just a thing. But yeah, that just sounds good, it's enjoyable to listen to, etc. And I think the musicianship throughout the album, for the most part, is pretty good. The melodies, when it comes to like guitar leads and Queen singing in the choruses and stuff like that, are all pretty good. The guitar riffs that are on this album, while I wouldn't say there's any that are extremely memorable, aside from maybe a couple of the lead guitar riffs, like I said during the choruses and stuff like that, are not extremely memorable, but they work well enough for the songs. The drumming in this album is also pretty good. There's it adds a lot to the album, I think, and generally it works pretty well. The breakdowns in this album, Fit for a King likes to do a lot of breakdowns, and while I can't say that all of them are absolutely fantastic, there are some that are kind of generic and not really all that interesting. There's a few good ones in this album, I'll say. And of course, the vocal performance in this album from Ryan Kirby is also quite good, I think. In this album, he actually does, I believe, all of both screaming vocals and the Queen singing vocals. In their first couple albums, he did the screaming vocals, or most of them at least, and then another member in the band did the Queen singing. And then in their last album, Death Grip, he did, again, most of the screaming vocals, and I believe most, if not all, of the Queen singing. There wasn't as much in that album, I think, but in this album, there's a lot more Queen singing, in the choruses. Most of the songs have it, and I will say that it's pretty good throughout. I would still say that I think he's better at screaming than he is at singing, but that may just be because he's only been doing singing for the last couple albums. His voice sounds pretty good in this album, and it works pretty well for the sound of the band and everything. It fits and everything, and I just think it's generally pretty good. And I would say overall this is probably Ryan Kirby's best vocal performance as far as Fit for a King goes. I think that this is probably the best he's ever been. His singing sounds better than it was in Death Grip, and his screaming vocals has a little bit more variety to it. Enslaved to Nothing, to me at least, from what I remember of it, was mostly more of the lower kind of screaming, growling, kind of whatever you want to call it. And then in Death Grip, he did a little bit more variety, but not a whole lot. In this album, there's a lot more variety when it comes to the screaming. He does more kind of mid to high range stuff, which all sounds pretty good, and I would say this is definitely his best vocal performance so far. I also actually enjoyed the lyrics a lot in this album, and Fit for a King, I think, usually has decent enough lyrics. I think some of the lyrics on their last album were pretty good, along with Slave to Nothing, the album before that. This album is no exception. I think there's some really good lyrics and topics and themes throughout this album, like in the songs The Price of Agony, Tower of Pain, Oblivion, Youth Division, and When Everything Means Nothing. I think they're pretty well written. I think that they are able to convey the message that they're trying to get across in each song very well. So that's definitely a positive, I think. I'd also say there's a little bit of variety in this album. There's not a whole lot, But like, say if you were to take the songs The Price of Agony, Backbreaker, and Tower of Pain, those three songs all have a bit of a different style. Price of Agony is more kind of melodic, in a sense, kind of a typical metalcore song. It's a little bit different, I think, from some of Fit for a King's other stuff. And Backbreaker is pretty much just one of those, like, in-your-face, really heavy songs. And then Tower of Pain is like Backbreaker, but a little bit more melodic. Kind of a very dark-sounding song to me. And those three kind of different styles, not completely different styles, but somewhat different, I think gives this album a decent enough amount of variety. However, there are some things in this album that I think are not great. Some of the songwriting and the breakdowns, like I said, some of the breakdowns are not incredibly great. They're kind of generic, and I think some of the songwriting as well is a little bit generic. A couple of the songs on here, like I said, The Price of Agony, well, it's still decent, feels very much like a typical metalcore song, I guess, which I guess isn't a huge surprise because Fit for a King is kind of a typical metalcore band, but I just think that they do things generally a bit better than some of the other ones out there. I also think it would have been cool if they had included maybe one more song, or maybe two. I mean, one would have been just fine for me. That's pretty much just because, first of all, this album is maybe 35 minutes long, which of course is not a terrible length. I think, you know, a lot of great albums are kind of 35, 40 minutes long. But I think it would have been cool to get one more song, and especially because really when you at least to me, there's only 9 real songs on this album. The second to last song, Depths of the Soul, which is pretty good, I think, is really, it's just a short little, maybe 2-minute long song that's really just serves as an intro to the last song, Oblivion. And while it does have kind of its own sound and style in a way, it's kind of its own little thing, so I can understand why they didn't make it like a part of the actual song Oblivion. I just think that they could have added maybe one more song to kind of counterbalance that, because really that's, to me, it's a decent thing, but I can't really see myself listening to it unless I want to listen to Oblivion directly after it, because it's really nothing more than a glorified intro that was just given its own song. And finally, pretty much the last big negative I have to say about this album is not really an issue with the album itself, but the way it was marketed. And I said the same thing about the Breaking Benjamin album that came out earlier this year. And there might have been maybe 1 or 2 other albums that have come out recently that did this. But I believe there were just too many singles for this album. There were 5 singles, which is half the track listing, because there's only 10 songs. I understand why they did this. Ryan Kirby actually made a video on YouTube, on his YouTube channel, maybe a week or 2 ago, explaining why they decided to include or put out so many singles before the album came out. Really, the only big reason for it was that the music industry is changing with the nature of singles and playlists and stuff like that. People just kind of listen to the singles. The singles are the most popular ones. They get all the radio play and everything, you know, stuff like that. The singles are often the most popular songs. He just said, you know, that just seemed like a better business decision for them to release several singles rather than just releasing like maybe 2 or 3 singles and then the album. The same thing happened with Breaking Benjamin, although I don't know if that's exactly the reason why they did it, but I can imagine that probably had something to do with it. And it also kind of came up with the band Red, because they said the way the music industry is going, they might stop producing albums and instead move towards producing just singles. Which I believe they said in a statement like a year ago, maybe. I can understand why they did that, but it's still kind of annoying to have so much music released before the actual album comes out. Overall, that's pretty much everything I wanted to say. I would say I did enjoy this album quite a bit. I've listened to it a couple times. Quite a few of the songs I've come back to quite often. I really enjoyed this album overall. I would probably say I recommend it, and I would probably say that this is also Fit for a King's best album. Fit for a King is one of those bands that I think gets better with every album. I think this is a pretty solid album. and I would definitely recommend it. As for my 3 favorite songs from this album, it's actually kind of difficult for me to say because, like I said, there's several songs on this album that I have come back to, and I could easily say maybe 5 of the songs. But overall, if I had to choose just 3 songs, I would probably say they would be Tower of Pain, When Everything Means Nothing, and Oblivion, with a special shout out to Youth Division, because that is a very close 4th favorite. And also a shout out to Backbreaker, which I actually completely forgot about, but that is a song that I've gone back to a lot as well. So, yeah, like I said, like 5 or 6 favorites from this album, it's hard to choose between. That's pretty much all I have for this review. Let me know what you guys think of the album. Did you like it or dislike it? And all of those kinds of things. What did you think of the review, etc.? And that's pretty much the end of this video, so I will see you guys next time.